Good evening, this is Open Book. I'm Richard Winham. My guest is actor, writer and producer Jason Tinney. Jason is curating a series of evenings of storytelling in Barking Legs Theatre, featuring everyday people telling their stories. The first evening will be Saturday, June 22nd, and the second on Sunday, June 23rd. Jason told me the whole concept began several years ago.
The origin of it really came from back in 2020. As you may recall, COVID was very popular. And some of the creative hustles I was doing to keep the lights on had evaporated. And I took a job with Chattanooga Ghost Tour. I had met Amy Petula, the owner of the tours. We were both doing radio plays, made a short comeback during 2020. And we were doing a radio play down in Georgia. And she had mentioned that she was looking for a guide and a storyteller and wanted to know if I'd be interested, having never done anything like that before. As a writer and as an actor, storytelling has always sort of, for me, been the root of both of those disciplines. But I'd never told a story. I'd never told a ghost story in this kind of fashion. Street corner storytelling, really, you know. And I remember Holly Morris Ellington, who my partner in crime, had said, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" And I said, "What?" You know, and she said, "Well, you know, you're kind of quiet. You can be moody. You don't smile a lot. You're kind of intense." And I said, "Well, isn't intensity good for ghost stories?" She said, "Not your kind of intensity." So, but I knew what she was getting at. She said, "You know, you're going to be exposed. You know, people aren't coming to see art or anything like that. I wouldn't have the insulation of a theater and then this group of people that were coming for a specific kind of artistic event." And so I did something that I never really, or I don't often do, is I really thought it through. And I said, how am I going to approach this and tackle it? And I knew that I wanted to be authentic. I wanted to be genuine. I didn't want to have a top hat and cloak and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to, when I told a story, I wanted to remind people of maybe an uncle that would take them to Chickamauga and tell them about Old Green Eyes. And so I approached it that way. And I started doing it. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a lot. And as I got really immersed in the history, the tour that I do is sort of a balance of haunts and history. It weaves Chattanooga's history in. You know, my love for the city grew deeper doing it. And the more I did it, the more I started having personal experiences on the tour. And I was weaving those personal experiences in. And when I weaved those personal experiences in, I saw that the stakes were being raised and the connections were becoming stronger because that personal experience on the streets of Chattanooga was coming from the person who had experienced it. And I found that really interesting. The best way that I can illustrate it is that I may share a story. If you come on a tour, you may hear a story about a famous hotel with a haunted room, and I'll tell you about what happens in that haunted room. When I tell that story, what I'm hoping is that I'm entertaining you, that you're learning some history about the city, and if I'm doing my job really well, I'm spooking you a little bit. But when I tell you what happened to me when I went inside that room, then again, those stakes are raised. And then people are like, oh, what happened next? And I really love that. And then about, I guess in 2019, I really started to put together this idea of putting together a nonfiction storytelling series here in Chattanooga. And it grew out of the tours. It grew out of I'd always loved oral histories. I'd always loved the stuff that Foxfire down in Georgia put together of chronicling and recording these stories of people. And so I love that aspect of the oral tradition. But 2023 is when I started to really put together this idea. And it was actually Holly who had suggested the name Cast Iron Storytelling. And I thought, oh, wow, that is really great. You know, this idea of this kind of iconic Southern staple that is passed down, recipes that have gone into it. It just was wonderful. What I found when working on it was, wow, this metaphor works really great in the sense that we're taking these raw materials and we're forging this story. So 2023, I'm thinking about it, and then I'm getting towards the fall of 2023, and I'm doing a tour, and a woman from Waco, Texas is on the tour. And she says to me, can I ask you a weird question? So it's a ghost tour. Please ask a weird question. She says, why are there so many ghosts in the South? And I thought about this a moment, and I said, I don't know that there's more ghosts in the South than there are anywhere else in this country. But I do think there might be more people telling ghost stories. The South has this rich tradition of storytelling. Our second event, but our first full evening of stories, we'll have double the storytellers. We're going to have 6 storytellers who come from all different walks of life. And, we're workshopping those stories now in advance of that weekend. We get 2 nights, which is really exciting. Yeah, it's been great. Each of the storytelling events, our first event, all the stories are centered around a theme. And the first theme that the storytellers worked with was crossroads and constellations. And that was, tell us a story about a crossroads that you've come to in your life, and what were the stars or the signs that aligned that navigated you through that crossroads. And they all did a really wonderful job. I set up a workshop, and we had probably 6 or 7 sessions, maybe not even that many, and where I got them together. I worked with them as a group and as individuals, and we brainstormed ideas. We talked about that theme. Once we sort of zeroed in on a story idea, we started to ask a lot of questions. We started to establish, a beginning of the story, a middle of the story, the ending of the story. We established an anchor event. That way, when you're telling the story, one of the things that I teach in the workshop is about, you want to be very clear when you're telling a story. Oral story in front of an audience, you want to take them on a journey. You want to sort of take them by the hand and guide them. So when you center it around an anchor event, that keeps the story kind of focused. You can't deviate too much. And that's been and that process has been very cool, and it's been one of the things that from the get-go, I wanted to give the focus to non-performer. Being a writer and being an actor and a performer, I thought it was interesting to approach non-performers and give them the road. I wanted to illustrate that everybody has a story, and if they want to, they can share it, and I can help. Or hopefully I can help.
So for the inaugural event, you had 3 storytellers.
3 stories.
And they're going to be sharing their stories this evening.
Yes.
The first of whom is Taylor.
Taylor.
Would you care to introduce Taylor?
I'd love to introduce Taylor. Taylor and I go back a couple years when I had done some work at the Macaulay School. Taylor was a technical director for both the Macaulay School and GPS, doing behind-the-scenes stuff. It was interesting with Taylor because I'd worked on plays with Taylor. There was always something about Taylor that I knew that they had a story that they wanted to tell, and I wasn't sure if they had found the right venue to tell it. Taylor is an amazing photographer, also amazing woodworker, and just a very multi-talented individual. And I always thought that they had a story. So I reached out to Taylor and I said, listen, I'm doing this thing. You are on the top of the list of people I want to have a conversation with and see if you'd be interested in doing it. And they jumped at it, and I was really happy. What was great with Taylor and what was great about all of the storytellers is, with the exception of Taylor, some of them were sort of, I was like, I'm not sure that I have a story. And that's natural. And then they just started talking. I was like, well, we can dispel that myth because you just told me a story that's really compelling. But they would have like 5 different stories. And then one of the great discoveries was really, like I said, taking those raw materials and then forging them into and finding that. And I remember we had a group session and we were just bouncing ideas around and we're like, oh, this story pertains to that. And this theme pertains to that. And then they were all clicking. And I said, pause a second. This is the reward of art, is the discovery in the process. I'll say it's not going to get any better than this right now. so take a moment, own it. But it was really beautiful, beautiful. But Taylor's story, when we started to crystallize Taylor's story, I knew that they had a very powerful story. It was a story that had a lot of balance. It had humor. It had gravitas. It had these really kind of heavy moments. And I thought that they did a really, really nice job, not only in the writing of the story, but then when we take it from the page to the stage and make it an oral story, that they shared it beautifully, beautifully. And it touched a lot of people.
Okay, well, let's listen to Taylor tell their story.
I never thought a haircut would play a part in my life changing forever. The summer before my 8th grade year, I decided I wanted a pixie cut. So I went to hairbenders and sat in the chair and enthusiastically confirmed how short I wanted my haircut. And I loved this haircut. I thought it looked like Peter Pan. I was over the moon about this haircut. But I did notice people started treating me different afterwards. They weren't as kind. So I enter 8th grade at a particular all-girls private school. I was pretty well liked. Although after the haircut, some people were more awkward around me. But I got to school early every morning just to hang out with all of my classmates and my friends. That year I grew particularly close to a friend of mine. We'll call her Charlie. So one Monday morning, I come into school, and everywhere I go, everyone gets quiet. A friend pulls me aside and asks, "Is it true?" A rumor had been spread about me over the weekend that I was gay and in a relationship with Charlie. Told her it wasn't true. I had a boyfriend and went on with my day. But the rumors spread like wildfire through both middle and high school, and the bullying started just as fast. Girls ramming me with their shoulder and saying things like dyke and fag as they passed me, shoving me inside lockers, putting me into trash cans, dead-legging me as I walked down the stairs, songs like I Kissed a Girl sung at full volume behind me. Creative, I know, but it quickly put me into my first depression. I wasn't eating, I was barely sleeping. When I did, I was having nightmares. My grades dropped, so did my attendance. I began to self-harm, to feel anything other than the despair that I was feeling. The drama room was sanctuary for my friends and I. One day after we were all hanging out in there, I asked Charlie to wait and catch up. We hadn't been spending as much time together since the rumor started. We ended up crying, and we hugged, and I see faces of students I recognize smirking in the doorway. So I grab the first thing I can, a push broom, and chase them down the hall as they sprint away laughing, and think to myself, well, that's not good. And I was right. The next week, after PE, a staff member stops me. I'm excused from my next class. The principal would like to see me in her office. What could be so bad they would pull me out of my worst class? French. For someone who had never been in trouble at school, it feels like a walk to the gallows, especially with my classmates whispering all around me and my feet feeling heavier with every step that I take. As I open the door to her office, my stomach drops. The principal stands in front of a chair, its back to her desk. My heart's racing so fast it hurts. As I sit, I see the counselor standing in the corner, and thoughts start racing through my mind. Am I in trouble? I'm nauseous. Why am I here? Am I being expelled? What's going on? I get dizzy. What exactly is your relationship with Charlie? This is about the rumor. We're just friends. I have a boyfriend. We've been dating several months. My ears start ringing and my brain feels like it's surrounded by fog, and I'm only hearing every few sentences she says. At this school, we tolerate this behavior. Yeah, not only does she not believe me, but my hypothetical sexuality is a behavior to be tolerated. I glance at the counselor now sobbing and see she's just standing there taking notes. I wasn't about to tell them that just 3 weeks earlier, I almost attempted suicide. It was a Thursday. I looked up how to tie a noose online and practiced until I had it memorized. I don't remember where I got the rope, but I do remember tying it up. I got on the chair and lowered the noose around my neck, ready and willing to do anything to put an end to the relentless bullying, and my phone rings. A friend from English class asking if we had any homework. We'd been reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Thanks, see you tomorrow. Click. See you tomorrow. It rings in my head until I take the noose off my neck. What the principal said next snaps me back. You are no longer permitted to touch anyone on this campus. My blood ran cold. My friends hugging me or just rubbing my back as I cried had been a thread I was clinging to through all of this. Between my sobs, she dismisses me. I close her door behind me and turn to see my best friend since kindergarten coming to hug me, and panic floods me, and I back away and say I can't before sprinting off down the hall past bays of blue lockers and ongoing classes until I get to a forgotten bathroom. Cracked tiles, one light that's working, a sink that won't stop dripping, and one soap dispenser with any soap in it. Remember that pink pearlescent floral soap? That soap. I go to cry into my hands and see blood. How? Nausea, heart racing, hyperventilating, thoughts racing. I had just had my first panic attack. My body had gone numb, and without me noticing or even feeling it, I had scratched a knuckle on my left hand until I could see something white underneath the skin. Crying, I washed my hands, trying to figure out why I was even in trouble to begin with. And thought to myself, but this isn't my fault. I haven't done anything wrong. And it hit me. I haven't done anything wrong. Regardless if the rumor was true or not, I had just been myself. Other people had been telling my story. That is what was wrong. So, at the age of 13, I decided I wouldn't let anyone else tell my story ever again. I would live my life as an open book, be 100% myself always. The bullying continued the rest of the year, but I wouldn't hide anymore. The very next year, I discovered my sexuality, waking up inches away from kissing a friend after a sleepover before anxiety takes over and I throw up. They may have been right about my sexuality, but they were wrong with how they treated me. I'm still friends with Charlie to this day. And I did end up dating the friend I almost kissed, although that turned out to be a terrible mistake, but that's a story for another time. I wouldn't change anything. Without the rumor and the emotional and physical scars that it left, I would not be who I am today. And I happen to like who I am. And my haircut. Thank you.
That's a very personal story. It strikes me that one of the challenges for you, Jason, is you are a professional, an actor, a writer. So whether you like it or not, you've had to come to terms with criticism. Mm-hmm. That's just part of it. Mm-hmm. But for somebody like Taylor, who is not a professional, mm-hmm. or for that matter, any of the other storytellers you're working with, it requires a lot of sensitivity on your part, I think.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring up that point, because one of the things that I talked about with the storytellers, I didn't want to sort of hobble them in any way. I wanted them to tell the story that they wanted to tell. And so I was, as a mentor, I was just sort of I was just sort of guiding them along the way and down the roads that they wanted to travel down. And I said early on, I said, when we're selecting our stories, let's be very careful that you're picking a story that you want to share, that you feel comfortable sharing. You don't, if it's a story that is emotional or heavy, be sure that it's a story that you want to put out there and that you can put out there and be in control of it. I think one of the things I pointed out was you tell the story, don't let the story tell you, and that was one of the things we were always conscious of, and being sensitive about that. And I think that there was also the thing that that we were in it together, and that we were doing it in a space that people knew that they were coming for stories that might make them uncomfortable. I let them know that these are real stories. I let the audience know that, but I told the storytellers, I said, everybody that's in that audience is there for you, and one of the tricks I said is like. And I do this on the ghost tours. This is how I sort of like got through those initial tours, was like I picked a couple different people in the audience or in my group who I knew were there for the ghost tour, that were really excited about it. And I sort of told the story to them, and I was including everybody into the story, but it was in my mind. I was like, this is a story for you. And I said, Taylor, tell that story to whoever you want to tell it to. The Barking Legs Theater, make this your kitchen, make this your parlor, make this your front porch, that you're telling this story that you need to tell.
Well, you talking about owning the story, it could almost be Taylor talking. That's exactly what Taylor said to us, right?
Yeah.
Was that, as you said earlier, it was a crossroads moment in their life and a point at which they realized that they could either be subject to somebody else telling their story, or they could tell it themselves.
Well, the other thing that was great about Taylor, like afterwards, and this is what I was hoping would happen. I mean, part of the mission is to foster this art and craft of storytelling, and to preserve and honor these voices that call this region home. But what I was hoping is that from the storytelling that they would start to apply it in their everyday life, that when you are practicing storytelling as kind of this habitual thing, like you're just, at the end of the day, write down a couple of different things that happen. And the more that you do that, the more things become more sensitive to other things. You notice, you really smell the fragrance of wisteria in the spring. And these things become richer. And Taylor, and they would tell you this, that's this. They are journaling now every day. They are applying this every day, and they're excited about when can I come back and do it again. So that was really, really rewarding.
And you mentioned it, and it struck me when you were talking about it. There are parallels with what you were doing with the ghost stories.
Mm-hmm.
You were going out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
You were being put in a situation that wasn't entirely comfortable for you. It was alien to you anyway.
Right.
Your audience has some investment. They've signed up for this tour, so they have some expectation, and they are expecting something from you.
Right.
But otherwise, it strikes me that it's very similar.
Yeah. The thing about it too, and I knew that, and I bet you this. I knew that I had to take the story to them. I couldn't be passive. And I think that that's one of the things that I've benefited personally. Holly is right. I mean, I do have like this sort of moody side to me, and this, I don't know, this quiet kind of like I like to observe. But one of the things that I think I've benefited from practicing storytelling is, and I've said this before, but I'm no longer looking down and inward. I'm looking up and forward. And that feels good. I feel I've certainly have benefited from doing it. And I hope that other people, we're going to, 22nd and 23rd will be the official launch of workshops that I'm offering to the public, adult workshops, youth workshops, high school age, group and one-on-one. And that's one of the kind of the overarching purposes of those workshops is to sort of show you how to do this, and it's, and that it works, that it, you can apply to personal and professional settings.
Were you a writer before you were an actor?
It's sort of the writing and acting came together about the same time. I had started getting interested in writing in high school. I had some wonderful teachers who had a wonderful English and a wonderful history teacher that instilled both a love of literature and history. So I had that going for me. But at the same time, I sort of fell into acting, and they were always kind of like side by side. In my 20s, I had stepped away from acting, and I wanted to focus mainly on the writing. But 15 years later, I came back to it, and I was much better. I think that the other thing too that I've been talking with. It's funny too with the storytelling thing. When I talk to non-performers about storytelling, they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds interesting. I have never done anything like that before," or "I'm terrified. I can't do that." But when you talk to an actor about it, or some of the actors I've talked to, they're like, "So wait a second. I'm just going to get on a stage and tell a story." Like, yeah. So I always have suggested. I said you should take a workshop because then you can unlearn some of this acting stuff. And sort of maybe it gives you a different perspective on how to approach a character. Not that you toss away the other techniques that you've learned through your training, but this is just an additional technique that perhaps gives you a different window into a character. And they're like, ooh, yeah. So I see it applying to people. Anywhere you got to communicate with other people, I think that it's a useful tool.
Well, it's always struck me as something of an irony that, and I talk to a lot of singer-songwriters, and invariably it comes out they're naturally an introvert.
Yeah.
And so performing is not a natural move for them.
Right.
Writing, analyzing their feelings, trying to come to terms with who they are as a person, that's natural to them.
Mm-hmm.
But to then take those feelings and to put them into a song and then perform them for people they don't know, they often find that kind of a challenge.
That's what I tip my hat to. I tip my hat to storytellers, to solo musicians, stand-up comedy, which is a whole other beast. I tip my hat to those people that will go up there and do that, and for those storytellers, particularly the ones who've never done it before, man, I applaud their bravery for doing it. I'm actually getting a little teary. That the fact that they trusted me,
Well, they trusted you because you've done it. And one of the comments that you made in a previous conversation that I thought was really interesting, when you were talking to actors, they blanched when you said, "No, you're not going to be performing a character, and you're not going to be telling someone else's story. This is your story."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like, I'd never really thought about that.
It's sort of foreign to them, the idea of just sort of being themselves, and I get that, when you're acting and you're doing it, and that's sort of your profession and what your focus is, you build up a lot of armor. You have a lot of techniques that you can utilize to tackle roles and stuff like that. And so I think sometimes I don't know, everybody's different, but it may be a little difficult to sort of unthink that,
When you approach a part, do you look for something in yourself that helps you to get inside this person that you're portraying? Yeah,
that's a great question. Sometimes, I don't consider myself a method actor. I sort of look at, I first start looking like at the script and the language, because I'm a writer first, and I look at that first. But yeah, there's certainly like moments that I look at where I've experienced something that I can bring to a particular predicament that might be unfolding on stage. And I think more and more, and I think it's important that you do that, and I think that's why the storytelling is crucial to this. I had a professor in college, and I've still told this story before, but I always remember it, and it always keeps me in focus with certain performance things that I'm doing. he told me, he said, Jason, and this professor, John Manlove, one of the best acting teachers I ever had, he said, Jason, I went to see Death of a Salesman on Broadway with Dustin Hoffman as Willie Loman, and John Malkovich was playing Biff. He said, well, I got to tell you, I learned a lot about Willie Loman. I learned nothing about Dustin Hoffman. Didn't learn anything about Biff, but learned a lot about John Malkovich, and that's the performance I remember. That's the performance I remember. And I always kept that around, and I thought that had to do with bringing yourself to it. When I used to direct the students over at Macaulay, I would tell them, and I would tell them that story actually. And I said, this is your chance to tell your story and be protected. You know, if there's something that you want to get out, you know, do it through your character. And I think that and do it responsibly. You know, there's a professionalism that we're striving for. But yeah, that I think that it's a good way to do that. And with storytelling, it's sort of the same thing. It's just, it is as distilled as you can get. I always use the word distill when I'm talking about writing, when I'm talking to myself about writing. But with the storytellers, I said we're distilling something down to its essence. Not only the story itself, but also what you're sharing with the listeners.
And this is such a cool example of that. Cathy's story,
Mm-hmm.
the whole... When she first started, I don't know if she was reading it or if she had memorized it, but she didn't appear to be reading it. And it begins with a question, and I thought she was talking to me, and I thought she was asking me a question. That's how natural it felt.
That's great, because that's something that I told her to do. I told her to start it with a question. I said, Cathy, if you're having trouble getting this story started, ask a question. Because when you ask a question, you're offering something to the audience. So you've got them. They're like, and so we decided on about, she said to me one day, she said, do you remember your first up? I said, I do. Start your story with that, and then go from there. And that's how that, so the question thing, I offered that to the storytellers to say, it's a good way to start an oral story.
This is Cathy.
Do you remember your first love? I was 19. I was enamored with him. He was a handsome, tall country boy. A tall drink of water. He could be my husband. We started dating right after high school. The summer of 1985 was great for us. We had completed our Upward Bound program. We were seeing a lot of each other, hanging out on weekends, having a great time. But the summer was coming to an end, and off to college we'd go. Going to school in separate cities would make it difficult for us to see each other, but doable. We've decided that we're exclusive. That's right, M and me. We're rocking and rolling in this thing called us. But then he throws his wrench in the situation. He's enlisted in the Army. We'd be miles apart, but together and connected in our heart. Over the next 2 or 3 years, we'd write love letters and an occasional very, very expensive long-distance phone call. No unlimited long-distance calling at that time. Fast forward to about 1990. By this time, I've graduated college, and I'm working, and guess what? M's coming home. Yep, we'd be together again. I'm continuing to work, and he'll finish college. In fact, pretty close together, and we're rocking and rolling in this thing called us again. We see each other regularly, hanging out with my friends, his friends, my family, his family. Yeah. We're in love. We're in love. So one of his friends is graduating, and my beau M is throwing the party. Everybody's excited about it and talking it up. It's going to be a great party. So it's graduation day. It's a beautiful day in May. And I've invited one of my A1s, one of my girls, to come along with me. And, I'm looking cute. I have my sundress on, makeup done, hair done, nails painted, looking cute. So we arrive at the graduation and we find our seats and we connect with M. And he's looking handsome in his dress greens. He'd sit with us for a minute. We're there. He'd sit with us for a minute, but he was moving about a lot here and there, and I didn't think anything about it. He probably was busy with ROTC and maybe making some plans for the party, thinking about the party. So after the graduation, we arrive at his place. The mood was set for a great party. It was a warm spring evening. The music was playing, the aroma of food on the grill. Folks are laughing and talking. And if I remember correctly, Fresh Prince was playing. You remember? Summer, summer, summertime. Time to sit back and unwind. Anyway, everybody's having a great time. Well, a car pulls up and a chick gets out. And everyone can see that she's none too happy. And I said, wow, she's fired up at somebody. And as she's storming through the crowd, I'm like, wait, she's coming my way. And before I know it, she's all up in my grill. So she grabs my hand and shakes it very abruptly. Are you Cathy? My name is T. And I'm the girl that M has been. Well, I'm a good Christian girl, so I'm not going to repeat what she said. But just let me tell you this. M was sharing some of his tall drink of water. So she turns around and she's walking off. And it took a minute, took about a half a second for me to gather myself. But then as she was walking down the stairs, I was about to help her down the stairs, if you know what I mean. And as I reached to go at her, my A1 grabbed one hand, M grabbed the other. Y'all, I was 2 handholds from just losing myself. And I'm just not that girl. I'm not a drama-filled girl. So I gather myself. She's gone. And I looked over at him, my beau. That tall drink of water that could be my husband. That good old country Alabama boy. And with everything I had, I let him have it. I cold cocked him across his face. Needless to say, the party was over. It was a quiet ride home. I'm thinking, what just happened? Well, it's no surprise that the next few days were really rough. I physically felt my emotional pain. That hollow pit in your stomach. I moped for several days. And then I said, Cathy, you've got to get it together. And I began to reflect on the relationship. I made the sacrifices. I was the one who traveled most of the weekends that we were together. I was the giver in the relationship. And as much as it hurt, I realized that the party needed to happen. Yep. It was a hard life lesson that I eventually grew to appreciate. So life's moving forward. I'm continuing to work as a social worker, working with at-risk youth. They loved me. They called me Miss Cathy. I needed to carry some paperwork to affiliate office, our county commissioner's office, where my kids were entering a summer program. And there I saw him. Boy, was he handsome. They dressed nice, professional. We had a little small talk, and he had a gorgeous smile, the most beautiful teeth. And shortly after, we flirted a little bit. And shortly after, we had our first date. And from then to now, 27 years later, we are going strong. We are rocking and rolling in this thing called us. We sacrifice for each other. We love doing things together and spending time with each other. And we consistently demonstrate our love for each other.
This is Open Book. My guest is Jason Tinney, talking about Cast Iron Storytelling, a series of evenings featuring people telling their stories in Barking Legs Theatre on Dodds Avenue later this month. So we've listened to 2 stories so far. These stories that we are listening to are the stories that were told at the first Cast Iron Storytelling.
Correct.
The next one, which is toward the end of this month, the 22nd and the 23rd, and it's at Barking Legs. There are going to be 6 storytellers.
There are going to be 6 storytellers.
So not only have you doubled the number of storytellers, but you have created exponentially a bigger production.
Yeah.
And this whole thing is, as they tend to do, it's sort of mushrooming, right?
Yeah, it is. In a good way. In a good way. It's exciting. It's exciting. Between doing, when you have 6 people, when you have 3 people that have varying schedules, it's kind of interesting to try to get the workshops in. But when you have 6 people, it's even more interesting. And so I'm all around downtown Chattanooga with my book bag and my cup of coffee, my little computer, my little typewriter, and I'm like this little cobbler walking around town, the cobbler of stories. And so it's been kind of funny, but it's been exciting too to bounce around. I wasn't joking. I think that every minute is booked up until the end of June, like from minute to minute. But it's cool. It's exciting. It's great to do this, and it's in working with these storytellers is just. It's been really, I've said it a couple times, rewarding. It has, and I don't mean that as a cliche.
So it's clear from our conversation that you were the catalyst for all this, but you're not doing it by yourself.
I'm not doing it by myself. Cast Iron Storytelling is actually a product of Next Exit Productions, which is a production company that I co-founded with Holly Morris-Ellington. We've sort of made Cast Iron our flagship of this, and it's Next Exit Productions is a nonprofit organization, but we got a lot of great partners in town. Dillard Construction, Sophie's, this great store that's they got a location North Chattanooga, and on the south side we've sort of partnered with them, and that's a great store with a lot of home gifts, and they have great journals. So if you want to start your storytelling, thinking you're looking for a journal, you should check out Sophie's. They also have a lot of cool Chattanooga stuff. I've got my Chattanooga trucker hat I got from them in my book bag. I also want to thank Asheville Dispensary, which is a little lounge and apothecary cafe over in North Chattanooga. They've opened up their doors, and I've been holding workshops in their lounge. It's really quiet, and the staff is really cool, and we were partnering with them, and they've shown us a lot of hospitality just to hang out there all afternoon and sort of tell stories with each other. So they've been great. I want to thank them. Of course, I want to thank Barking Legs again for their support, and WUTC for having us come in here and do this kind of thing. I do want to thank Holly, and I want to thank Ginger and Nicole Rogers and Christy Burbank, who sort of make up kind of our board, quote unquote. They've been instrumental in helping me stay on task. And Holly Morris-Ellington is officially Nick Cast Iron Storytelling's creative and marketing director. So she's been doing all the cool, groovy graphics that we have for our event in June, 22nd and 23rd at Barking Legs. Summertime is our theme. So these will be stories that deal with the sultry season. Yeah, I've got a lot of people who are supporting me, and the enthusiasm for this has been really great. I mentioned Ginger and Holly. They They really were like, do this, because Chattanooga doesn't have something quite like this.
You've got great stories. Let's close with one. Do you want to say anything about Ginger?
Yeah, let's talk about Ginger Birnbaum. Ginger, I actually got to know Ginger by way of her daughter, Emma Virginia, who is a character in the story you're about to hear, and as a student over at GPS, and then through that connection, that's how I got to know her. And then, as I've mentioned before, she was very encouraging and kind of gave me the nudge to do this. And I knew this strange background about her. Oh, it's not strange, but it's interesting to me that she competitively told stories in high school. That was her sport. They had like, you could either, do football or other athletics, but they had this other athletics, which was storytelling. Yeah, I guess kind of comparable to kind of like forensics and debate a little bit, but she would orate. She would orate. So she told me this. She's like, are you kidding me? And then I heard out later, after all this was said and done, that she actually was the halftime entertainment for the football games in high school. And this is in Texas. In Texas, on the border. Like she was raised up in the Rio Grande region. She's originally from Mississippi. Actually, I was a little nervous because Ginger went to Ole Miss and Cathy went to Alabama, and I was afraid there was going to be this SEC kind of thing. But they played well with each other. But Ginger also works for Chattanooga Creative Design Studio. And she's just an all-around great advocate and champion, and she's somebody else that loves this city. And so I was really excited when she came on board, and I'm glad that she is a part of our team. That is, she's part of the Foundry.
This is Ginger.
So I've told like a lot of stories, just never my own, at least not exactly like this. In fact, as a kid in Texas, I was trained to be a competitive storyteller. And if you're wondering, what the hell is that? That's a fair question. So I would go to these competitions, and they would read me a story, and then I would go into a room of judges and retell that story with characters' voices, actions, my own thoughts about what I'd heard. What you need to know is that this kind of storytelling was highly, highly performative, and certainly not a true story told in first person. I loved it so much. Now, what I might have liked more than the storytelling itself was the preparation. My mother and I would scour the racks for the perfect outfit for my next competition. These ranged wildly, a shorts and vest set and cow print and fringe to a very, very full floral dress with a bow large enough to give my tiny frame flight. The outfit that I remember the best, the one that I loved the most, was found one warm Texas day at a little department store. I seem to remember double doors with a round rack in the middle, the one you turn to check out your selections. It felt very fancy. On top of the rack was a display of bows and necklaces and earrings, and then we found it, the perfect little storyteller girl suit. Because every little storyteller girl needs shoulder pads, and this one was complete with a pleated skirt in navy and white polka dots. Walking out of the store that day, I felt like I've made it. This competition is going to be mine. So what did I love even more than the preparation? Well, that would be the competition. In my little kid mind, this is what I imagined. Ginger, busting through the doors of the saloon at the school, taking in the friendlies, having a sip at the water fountain, checking out the not-so-friendlies, just wielding my next story like a six-shooter. I loved those competitions, and I lived for them. You can imagine, at this point, that all these things that I really loved in childhood, competition, performing, pageantry, I easily carried into adulthood. So much so that soon after marrying me, my husband came to call the kind of role-playing my Barbieing. And that's fair. Like, that would seem like a dig if you overheard it, but it's fair because, y'all, there's a lot of Barbies. I have time to, like, only tell you just a couple, just a few. So let's see. We have, like, gardening Barbie. Her gloves are so good, and she's into civic pruning, which means that when she sees a pretty flower, she's going to pull over on the side of the road, snatch that flower, and use it in a floral arrangement later. We also have grocery store Barbie. Her list for the grocery store is beautiful, split into all the right categories, mapped for ease. She's got such a system, and more importantly, before she leaves the store, she thanks every single attendant because in a place like a grocery store, teamwork counts. And then we have Event Barbie. She carries scissors and tape and exacting lists, as well as all the anxieties needed for the perfect event. We also have Philosophical Barbie, and she'll talk you in circles that you just can't even imagine exist, and, well, I don't know, maybe they don't. Travel Barbie. She packs her bags just so and is very careful to be prepared for takeoff. She dreams of a day that TSA uses photos of her luggage for the how to pack perfectly laminated sheet hung by the scanner. Sometimes if things get real intense, we get burn it down Barbie, but we don't always talk about her. The best mashup of Barbies came when I was asked to do a fundraising hike for a cause near and dear to my heart. So in this case, we get Good Cause Hiker Barbie. At miles 10, 20, and 30, she ducked behind boulders to make sure she wasn't seen, reapplying her lipstick. And when asked as she made her way past the aid stations, "Oh my God, is that the same lipstick from this morning?" She said, "Yes, it is," and lied. Why did she want to appear as if tomato red lips had been stitched to her face? We're never going to have the answer to that question, so just give up. But really, the mother of all Barbies came to roost when I became a mother. So I told myself lots of stories about how I was going to be the perfect mother. Why would I set myself up like that? It's a good question. Oh, that's because other people told me stories all the time about how I was going to be the perfect mother. You're so nice. You're such a good babysitter. Your kids are going to love you. You're going to be such a fun mom. I bought into that in a big, big way. And nonetheless, there I was in a glider that I hated. This thing, it was like the arms had been yanked into submission with these ugly, puffy little diagonal pleats stapled aggressively, and then a piping of the same rough, ugly beige cotton was applied just so, almost covering the staples, almost. I hated that chair. I still hate that chair. I really, really do. So you can glide with me now. Imagine that you're here too. But don't forget how ugly the chair is. So I was in that chair with my new, precious baby girl in this arm, and I had wedged a pack of crackers between my hip and the arm of that chair, which had become a bit of a home for me, unfortunately. So there we were. Even though that chair was so soothing, the feeling so expected, the gliding back and forth, the peacefulness of it, the sound of the tires on gravel below instantly built a knot in my stomach, an immediate tension in the center of my body. Even my elbows felt heavy. The reckoning that I felt was coming was almost unbearable. My husband was coming home for lunch, and he wanted to check in on me, see me, snuggle his precious little girl, and make sure that I had a little something to eat. I also knew that he was concerned and worried about the state that I was in, a new mother struggling with way more than just the typical newborn things. I heard the car door slam and him come in and shut the door, his footfall on the steps. The shame on my cheeks gets so heavy that it feels like there's humiliation melting down my body. As he rounds the frame of the door, he sees me there, where he left me hours before. His eyes grow wide, and that recognition that I knew was coming was so clear on his face. Even though he tried to hide it, it was uncomfortable, and I felt raw. He said, "Here, let me help you clean up a little," and went to reach for the crackers that were wedged at my hip. And as he reached for them, I said, "Don't take my crackers. They're all that I have. I love these crackers. I need these crackers. I want them in this chair in this room, and you cannot take them." He was obviously thrown by my desperate reaction. Clearly, for me, who loved performing in competition and pageantry, well, especially in this role that I wanted so badly, it was evident to both of us that I had finally hit rock bottom. I'd barely been treading water anyway. If he took those crackers into the kitchen, I would have to stop gliding and get up to get them. The gliding was my best guarantee of keeping this beautiful baby satisfied. I couldn't risk the angry, shrill, piercing, crying, the critiques of motherhood. I just couldn't. Realizing this, he called my mother and she took me to my midwife, and that's where I learned that I was suffering with postpartum depression. And that is not the end of the world or the biggest failure ever. It's actually treatable and even accepted in the light of the day. So that's what we did. We treated it. We started to accept it. We learned about it. I tried to feel less ashamed. Months went by, and some of the fog started to lift, and, well, when I mommy Barbied so hard and turned baby food into gourmet baby food, I chose cod and oranges to make that baby food. Well, our precious girl, she just flung that all over the kitchen, and I laughed. Okay, like I didn't laugh at first. I definitely flipped out, but then I laughed because I could finally see her little fingers grasping the spoon, and I realized, who the hell puts fish in baby food? This is crazy. This is really crazy. So, things can be a wreck, and they can be magnificent. They can be delightful, and they can be horribly, horribly sad. They can be pretty frustrating, and they can be fantastically hilarious. All at once.
Ginger Birnbaum, Development and Outreach Director for Chattanooga's Design Studio, was one of the 3 storytellers in the inaugural cast iron storytelling evening in Barking Legs Theatre on Dodds Avenue. Later this month, Jason will be hosting 2 more evenings of storytelling in Barking Legs on Saturday, June 22nd, starting at 7:30, and on Sunday, June 23rd, starting at 5:30. Details are on the website, barkinglegs.org. This has been Open Book. I'm Richard Winham. Thanks so much for listening. Please join us again next Saturday at 7. Good night.